Welcome to Nonprofit Docs. I'm your host, Dr. Mark Hardy, and with us today is Dave LaBarre. And Dave LaBarre is a University of Notre Dame alum, but he's also had over 3 decades of experience in the nonprofit sector. And he is here today to help us solve some problems with employment that we might have in our nonprofits. And we all have staffing issues, and we all have to hire the right people for the right jobs. And Dave has come up with a solution to some of our problems, and we'll discuss that. But just to let you know his background, he has served on many boards. He has served with many organizations, including and not limited to the American Medical Association, Professional Convention Management Association, Habitat for Humanity, the Catholic Cemetery Conference, and a lot of other organizations focused on children and education and veterans. And so during his career, he's had several issues he's had to overcome. He has served also on multiple boards, so he has a lot of background in board strategy and board dynamics, and that is one of his areas of expertise amongst many. And so he's here today to talk about his new company, and I'll let him introduce that. But he is with us right now on Zoom, and hopefully you can see his face as we're talking. How you doing, Dave?
Very good. How are you? Thank you for inviting me.
Well, great. I am glad you're here. Could you give us a little background on Nonprofit Resource Partners, which is your company? What I'd like to know is when you were in the nonprofit sector, what were the struggles that you saw in the nonprofit sector that led you to create this company?
Well, I mean, it kind of evolves over time. I mean, many nonprofits are created by individuals that have a passion for a certain mission. It could be as a result of a difficult situation within their family or a passion of theirs, like you mentioned, as far as children's organizations or the military or so forth. So, there's a lot of there's a lot of people out there that are creating nonprofits, but don't necessarily have experience on how to go about that. And I lived that myself. I mean, I created a nonprofit long time ago, 40 plus years ago. And I went through those same trials and tribulations. So a lot of the things that we try to address are things that I experienced myself. And so it's not uncommon for nonprofits to have people that don't necessarily have extensive knowledge in either a specific skill set or within that type of organization. They don't necessarily bring experience or expertise. Many times, nonprofits start out with family members and friends, and they do it because of the commitment to the individual with the organization, but they don't necessarily bring that expertise. And that's not to take anything away from those people, because in many cases you still need those individuals, and we appreciate their commitment to helping us as individuals and friends and family.
Can I interrupt you? Now, it seems to me that most nonprofits start that way, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
so it's kind of part of the genesis, the beginning of a nonprofit that has to evolve over time.
I'll give you an example. Not too long ago, I did a search on the IRS website, and I asked for, give me all the nonprofits that were created in the last year in Illinois. I did it in multiple states, but just for example, Illinois. I think we came up with about 3,600 nonprofits that were started within that year. After a year later and going back and doing some research, probably only about 25% of them still exist. And that's not uncommon. And that's not through fault of their own. It's, in many cases, it's just they're passionate about something, but they don't know how to approach it.
Right.
And that's sad, because a lot of times their thoughts, their missions, their ideas are worthwhile. They just don't have that expertise. The other challenge, though, is nonprofits tend to pay a lot lower than the corporate America. And so as a result of that, you don't necessarily get the same level of people looking or being able to fill those roles. And if you do have them, sometimes they leave because they want higher pay. So it's a constant challenge to maintain a staff. And as a result, you have a revolving door. And it's very hard to run any type of organization, whether it's a corporate or a nonprofit organization, if you have a constant revolving door with people in critical positions coming and going.
Absolutely. And sometimes I think nonprofits, and I think this is even true in the foundation world, the people they hire are people who have volunteered for them or maybe have sat on their board or whatever, but they're not necessarily the people that are the best qualified for that particular job. It's kind of a like, oh, well, they've been dedicated to this organization, so of course we should give them a chance and hire them. And my experience has been that isn't always a good choice.
Well, I'll give you an example. There's organizations out there or companies out there that can provide you with someone to do administrative work. But in a nonprofit, you want the people that you bring in for those roles to have experience in certain software. You know, whether they have that skill sets, a lot of times it doesn't exist. So you have to take into consideration the fact that there's going to be a learning curve. You might have a nonprofit. They don't understand the tax form of a 990, how to file it, what to do. They may not have ever done an audit for a nonprofit. So there's certain expertise that, yes, there are people with skill sets in those categories, but not necessarily specific to the nonprofit world. That it's not that they can't learn it, they can, but it takes some time. And if you have the time to give them and train them, it's great. But if you don't have that time, you need to be able to hire those people with that expertise.
Is that part of what you offer? You offer experienced people either on a part-time basis or maybe sometimes going into a full-time basis who already have these skill sets. What are the kinds of skill sets and people who are consultants with your company?
You hit it right on the head. Absolutely. All of our consultants are experienced individuals in the nonprofit community. And we do a very thorough screening of their background, their education, and we look for the skill sets that they can bring to the table. So our support can be anywhere from an admin assistant all the way through every position in a nonprofit up to the executive director. So that includes fundraising, grant writing, volunteer management, plan giving. Actually, we have 16 positions with our organization. And so there's a lot of different types of roles within a nonprofit that when those people that are starting that nonprofit start out, they don't realize the extensiveness of the knowledge that they need to have. We
Right.
can bring that, and we can bring it with people that have many, many years of experience and documented success in raising in the fundraising example, raising millions of dollars for organizations. And that's what we try to bring to the organization. We provide that expertise. And more importantly, we're there during the period of time that they need us. If they need us for 1 day, a week, a month, 6 months, we can come in and do it for that period of time. And then we walk away when they bring in a person that has that full-time experience and is going to work with them full-time.
Now, my experience has been with nonprofits over my 30, 40 years involved with them is that both the board and sometimes the nonprofit think that running a nonprofit is a lot like running a business or running an entrepreneurial organization. And one of the struggles that I have had, and I don't know if you can verify this, is that running a nonprofit is very different from running a for-profit business, number one. And number two, they have very different goals. And number three, and I get into trouble with people who are running businesses. I say that I think running a nonprofit is more difficult than running a for-profit because you don't have the incentives that for-profits have to offer to people. So what has your experience been with board members, with other people thinking that a nonprofit should be run like a for-profit business? And what are the differences? Because the staffing would certainly be affected. Like,
Absolutely. Actually, you mentioned a key word that I think answers that question is what is the incentive between a non-for-profit and a corporation? Corporation tends to be the incentive is financial. How
Right.
much money can we make to either grow the company, expand the company, so forth and so on. In a nonprofit, it tends to be mission. How could we impact and help the cause that we're focusing on, whether it's children, military, homeless? How do we do that? Obviously, you need the financial backing as well, and that definitely is part of it. But that's not the incentive for many people in the nonprofit world like it is in a corporate America.
Right. Right. And so when you're staffing nonprofits, it's really important, I think, to have that nonprofit experience. It's okay to have business experience, certainly, but to understand that there are definitely differences between running the two. And so just going to a place that does temporary staffing or anything, you're not going to get that kind of expertise that you would get from people who have worked in the sector, who have studied the sector, who are experts in certain parts of the sector. And nonprofit sector has many different facets to it. I don't think people understand that. And staffing is certainly one of them. I guess we don't think of staffing as being an issue in nonprofits. We just don't think about it that often. But it's
Until you
certainly
need it.
until you need it. Absolutely. And until your executive director tells you, "Oh, by the way, this is my last week. I'm gone,"
Exactly.
and you have to hire an executive director, but you don't want to rush it. So maybe you go to an interim executive director to fill that gap. Those kinds of things. So is that the kind of thing you would do?
Absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, we have 16 different types of positions from admin assistant to executive director that all have that specific experience and knowledge in that individual role. Many cases, because of the extensiveness of their backgrounds, we have several people that can fill 5 or 6 roles. If you if you're an executive director, for all intents and purposes, you could pretty much do every one of those roles you have in your career. I'll give myself as an experience. If I have a client and obviously I'm at a higher level than the average person maybe, but if they need someone to stuff envelopes for a meeting or a special event, I have no problem stepping in and stuffing
Right.
letters. We've all done that as
Yeah.
executive directors. And so many of these individuals can be a fundraiser, they understand plan giving, they can handle a lot of the accounting needs. And so that's why we're very selective in the people that we bring into the organization, because the more skill sets that they have, the more valuable they are to the clientele that we're trying to assist. Instead of having one person for each type of category, we want to have people that have that extensive background. And that's why in many cases, we look to people that have studied in the nonprofit world. You
Mhm.
mentioned Notre Dame. Notre Dame is just one of the many colleges, but Notre Dame has an extensive Masters of Nonprofit Administration. I went through that program. It was outstanding. I
Yeah.
would say probably half of our consultants have come out of Notre Dame
Mhm.
because they bring that experience. Not only do they go to Notre Dame with that experience, but they get even more experience by going through that master's program. And
Yeah.
so we want people that can fit any role. It doesn't matter what you were in a full-time position. We want people that are able to step in and handle that need that the clients have, whatever it is, for however long they have that need.
And just to comment on the Notre Dame degree, one of the uniquenesses of the Master of Nonprofit Administration is that it's actually housed in the School of Business, the Mendoza
Yes,
College of Business. And
correct.
so there's a heavy emphasis on the monetary side of nonprofits, the finance, the accounting, so on and so forth. That I don't think, and I've got a PhD and a master's in philanthropic studies, but we didn't have to study accounting and that. And my experience in the real world of nonprofits is that for accountants and finance people, they have to understand fundraising, and the fundraising staff has to understand accounting because it works very differently than the for profit sector. And there's often conflict there. Have you found that?
Absolutely. In the nonprofit world, your focus is not so much on the bottom line. It's achieving a goal, but you have to have the knowledge in order to be able to get there. I mean, I'll be honest, accounting was not necessarily my strongest suit. So when I went accounting, I had to work. I had to work in as far as understanding how to read financial statements and and the debits and the credits and all the idiosyncrasies of each of those roles. But going through a program such as that, it's so extensive. They have very skilled professors that have the knowledge and experience in each one of those categories. So when you come out of a program like that, Northwestern has one, DePaul has one. There's a lot of organizations, a lot of great schools and colleges, universities that have those programs. You're going to walk away with experience that you thought you knew, and you'd be surprised at how many times the light bulb goes off and it's like, wow, I never realized that. And that's what's so valuable about hiring people with that type of background. Not only do they have the practical experience, but now they have the educational knowledge to go and exceed in that or excel in that position.
Dave, let's talk about your target client. And, we have large nonprofits that are millions and millions of dollars. We have medium-sized nonprofits. And then, of course, we have small or startup nonprofits sometimes. What is your target client for your organization?
Because of the fact that I've gone through many different organizations at different levels, I know that the ones that need the types of services that we provide the most tend to be the smaller and mid-sized nonprofits. I would say if you had to put a dollar figure on it, their annual budget is probably about $3.5 million and below. That's not to say that if a client came to us that had a $5 million budget, we would turn them away. And no, I'm not going to do that. But there are other organizations that exist that handle the large organizations like the American Cancer Society, the Red Cross, so forth. They're called AMCs, which is Association Management Companies. They do virtually the same thing that we're doing, but they're doing it at such a higher level, and their price point is significantly higher. So the small and mid-sized nonprofits do not have the benefit of being able to utilize their services because they just don't have the revenue to be able to pay for that service. And that's not a knock on the AMCs. They do phenomenal work, and I've worked with many of them. However, our price points tend to focus on the small and mid-sized nonprofits because they're the ones that need the work the most or the assistance the most. And in many cases, they're the ones that are developing their skill sets and their knowledge within the organization. Because, like I said, a lot of them start from scratch and we help them get through those hurdles. So that's kind of the focus that we address is the small to mid-sized nonprofits.
And let me ask you this. Is there a position or a staffing position, I guess I would say, that many nonprofits need, but they don't know that they need it? In other words, they come to you and say, we need these things, and you, in fact, know that they need something else. Is there a position that you see that they are neglecting on a pretty consistent basis that you could help out with? Or not? And I'm kind of throwing this out there because I don't know.
No, I mean, there are. I mean, virtually every organization has some gap in their knowledge base. I'll give you an example, and I won't name the organization. There's one that we're looking at helping right now, and I've done some work with them already. It's a military organization, and they have a golf outing that they run each year. They have two different golf outings. One is run by a corporation that does all the work, raises all the money, and they divide the monies that they receive, the profits that they receive across multiple organizations. But then they've started their own golf outing that it's a smaller event. They handle all the management of it. They handle all the organization, the fundraising, and so forth. But just to put it in perspective, they only raise about $30,000, but at the end of it, with paying all the expenses, they only have $6,000 left. Now, to do all that work in a golf outing, golf outings are a lot of work. I've run many of them. And to come out of that with $6,000 is frustrating. And so we're talking to them about we can bring a fundraiser in there that have raised $1.5 million, $2 million in fundraising, help them with sponsorships, help them with other approaches, registrations, all of that. And it's not that they don't have the willingness to do it, and they just don't have the knowledge and the skill sets on how to do that. Their experience and their expertise was in the battlefields that we support wholeheartedly. They're not fundraisers. And so while that money that they raise is going for good causes in their communities, the results are just they're not able to do it because they just don't have the expertise. So we're looking
Hmm.
at bringing in a fundraiser to help them out. And as soon as I mentioned that to them, they said, no discussion any further. We need to be able to generate more money so we can help food pantries and we can help scholarships in our communities. And so we're going to hopefully try to help them do that. And that's just a knowledge that, not everyone is comfortable asking for money or know how to ask for money. I'll go back to something I wanted to say earlier that I'll say now. One of the major differences between a corporation and a nonprofit is in the nonprofit world, it's more about the friend raising, developing friendships and relationships than it is about, so to speak, fundraising. The goal of a good fundraiser is if you're developing those relationships and those friends, and inviting people to support the organization through their attendance and participation. Many times, if you're doing your job well, you don't even have to ask for money because they are so involved and entrenched in the mission of the organization, they start writing checks to you. And that's the difference between corporate America and nonprofits is that it's more about the friendship and the relationship building than it is about selling widgets and who can sell the most widgets. So I wanted to make that point because that's delineation between corporate America and nonprofits.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. The consulting I have done with nonprofits is that one of their biggest problems always is money, right? And I have run into situations where the board, they have program people, they have an executive director. Well, I'll give you one example, and again, I won't use it, but the executive director was working 3 jobs to afford to be their executive director because they weren't paying her much. And I said, why not? So, well, we don't have the money. And I said, well, do you have a fundraiser? And they said, oh, no, we can't afford one. And I was trying to explain to them that the one person that you want to expend money on is your fundraiser because they are the one person who can bring revenue into the organization where everybody else is expending money. And for some reason, I think organizations are afraid to hire fundraisers because they're afraid they're not going to make their money back. And maybe that's my unique experience, but can you speak to that?
Fundraising is a skill set that not everyone has or is comfortable doing. I mean, there's so much involved in fundraising, the different types of fundraising. And yes, I think you're right that they don't know how to do it or they don't want to do it. So a lot of times what you want to do is you want to help teach them along the way. Our goal is to not only just help them get through that period of time where they might have a gap, but also to teach them how to do it when we leave.
Mm.
That's primarily one of our goals as well is to teach them the specifics. I was talking to the Marine group, and right now all they have is a page on their website that says, you can donate $10 or $25. And I'm like, there's 10 other ways that you could put on the website to do fundraising, to give people an option. In the charitable world, everyone has kind of a preference of how they like to give money. Some people
Mm.
respond to phonathons. Some people respond to direct mail. Some people respond to being invited to an event. What you have to do as a good fundraiser and as a good executive director is you have to be able to have methods to approach to each of those types of fundraisers because you may get a decent amount of money from a special event, but if you only have one special event, like a golf outing that raises $6,000, you're missing out on all these other approaches of where people are waiting to be able to give money that way. They may not be a golfer. They may not have the time to go to a golf outing because they work 40 hours a week. So you
Right.
have to be able to develop programs that meet all of the different approaches that donors focus on. And that's
Yeah.
one of the skill sets that we try to train.
Yeah, and I want to make the point that you not only offer temporary staffing or what you call fractional staffing, you offer consulting services to help people develop their organizations, for instance, board development, fundraising development, those kinds of things, in addition to the staffing and maybe in tandem with. Would that be correct?
Absolutely. I mean, we just
Okay.
had a client, a big nonprofit out of DC. I won't mention the name again. They have 124 affiliates across the country, so they're pretty large. They
Okay.
asked us to come in and do a seminar for 24 of their rural affiliates that are
Okay.
in smaller markets and don't necessarily have, the income level in those communities as well as some of the other larger communities. So we
Okay.
went in there and did a full day training, and half of the training was on how to do proper fundraising or the different methods of fundraising. And the other part of the seminar was on developing talent and recruiting talent, because that's another challenge that a lot of people don't know is how to bring in people with the skill sets that you need or that you don't have. So that seminar was a one-day seminar with 24 different affiliates, but we taught them two different main components that will help them to move on and hopefully increase the bottom line for their organization, but also bring in additional talent that can help them go further with that skill set.
Okay, so let's kind of break this out a little bit. Can you give me kind of in a nutshell what fractional staffing is all about? And we have a video on this which we're going to show, but I'm wondering in your words if you could give us an overview and then we can go to the video.
Fractional staffing is just a current word for temp staffing, quite honestly.
Okay.
It's not anything different than what existed for years under the term temp staffing. Fractional staffing is just the latest buzzword. The bottom line is we come in there, and as I mentioned earlier, we fill critical gaps in an organization for whatever period of time that you need it. And we do it with people with the expertise to be able to do the job. So when you need to file that 990 tax return, you need to do an audit. You need to create an event and run an event for you. We bring people in that have done that for years and years and years, that know how to do it. And so we bring that in. It's a cost savings for you because you're not paying taxes, you're not paying insurance, you're not paying Social Security. So the price point is going to be cheaper at that period of time than bringing in a full-time person. But in some cases, it may take 6 months to find that full-time person.
Right.
So our role is to come in there, bring the expertise, fill the gap that you are experiencing, and do it with knowledgeable people for the period of time that you need it. At that point, we walk away, and if you need us again, we'll come back. If you don't, we thank you for your business, and we're here if you need us in the future. So that's what fractional staffing is. We're filling those critical gaps during critical times with expertise and doing it on a temporary basis for as long as they need us.
Well, great. Well, listen, let's do this. You put together a great video to give us more depth and explanation of fractional staffing. So let's play that right here.
Need more hands on deck without breaking the bank? Say hello to fractional staffing. Fractional staffing is like having a dream team of experts, but only when you need them. Instead of hiring full-time staff for every role, you bring in specialists part-time. Fractional staffing is not just a trend. It's a powerful tool that can transform your nonprofit's operations and impact. This way, you get top talent for crucial tasks without the full-time costs. For nonprofits, this means more resources for your mission. Imagine having a marketing guru for your big campaign or a financial whiz during budget season. Plus, it's flexible. Scale up or down based on your needs, so why stretch your budget thin? With fractional staffing, you can do more with less and focus on what really matters, making a difference. Ready to transform your nonprofit? Dive into fractional staffing today. Do more with less and focus on what really matters, making a difference.
Dave, that was a great video, and I know
Thank you.
that you offer some great services. But my question is always people who work in the nonprofit sector, because let's face it, most people aren't going to get rich in the nonprofit sector. Why in the world would you choose to go into the nonprofit sector instead of the for-profit sector, other than you're trying to do good things in the world? But let's face it, it's a lot of hard work. It's not always financially rewarding, although it might be emotionally rewarding. And I think everybody has a story about why they are doing what they're doing. Not only people like you who have companies like this and have served with many nonprofits in many different capacities, but also board members join nonprofit boards. Usually, if they're good board members, they usually join because there is a personal connection. So can you share with us your personal journey to get involved with the nonprofit sector?
My first foray into doing volunteer work was soon after college, I was introduced to the Starlight Foundation, whose grant wishes for seriously ill children. And never having been involved in an organization like that, I wanted to be a wish granter. I wanted to deal with the children directly. And so when you're dealing with children who are in many cases very sick, and sitting down and talking to them, not with, with their parents in a different room, because you wanted to hear their story, not their parents' approach on their or take on their story. You wanted to hear what was important to them, or what is something that they really wanted to do. And so when you got down to that and you heard some of the stories that they had, it was so fulfilling to be able to provide them with fulfilling that wish and that grant, that desire. I had one little girl, or actually she was more of a teenager, and her goal was to see David Letterman. And we were able to, and this was someone in Chicago, we were able to arrange for her to attend a recording of the David Letterman program. And to find out later that they did a wonderful job where they allowed her to sit at his desk. He came out and sat with her and he talked through her. When they were actually filming, he pointed her out to the audience and they scanned to her in the audience. So that experience, she left New York with an unbelievable experience. And to see multiple ones of those experiences like that really touched me very much. And it really kind of triggered what I wanted to do in my life, whether it was professionally or just on a volunteer basis. But the main story that really drove me from corporate America to the nonprofit world was I was working for a big four consulting firm and making great money. And I was happy. But unfortunately, my sister was experiencing breast cancer and she was given only a few months to live. So I took a leave of absence for 3 months and I cared for my sister during the day and my other sister cared for her at night after she worked during the day. That experience really made me start to think what was important to me in my life. And it wasn't about climbing the corporate ladder. It wasn't about how much money could I make. It was about what could I do and make a difference in this world. I never went back to that firm. Excuse me. Thankfully, I had a fraternity brother who offered me the position of the director of annual giving at a Catholic high school where he was the president of the high school. I immediately took the position, never having done that position at all.
I was going to ask you, a lot of people get into fundraising and they've never done it and they just learn on the fly. Yeah.
And that's exactly what I did. But having known the president, gone to school with him, he knew that if he was going to bring me in, he knew I would work hard to learn what I needed to learn. So I took that position and I took a 75% pay cut, which, when you're young, that's a significant amount of money. But it wasn't about how much money could I make or how far can I go in the corporate world. It was about what was important to me internally, what made me happy, what made me feel like I contributed to society or to the community. And so that was the journey that I took. And that just caused my career to snowball into the nonprofit world. And I just went from organization to organization. And most of my career moves were really not dictated by me. It was because people approached me based on my knowledge or skill set. And they said, we need someone like you to come in and handle this for us. Would you be willing to do that? And I've never been one to be afraid of a challenge. And so I would move to another organization. But by doing that, I also learned more about the nonprofit world. I learned about grant writing. I learned about planned giving. And doing that throughout my career of 40 plus years and being on 10 or 12 different boards, obviously you retain a great amount of knowledge. And that has led to the creation of the Nonprofit Resource Partners, because now we can bring that knowledge with other people that we bring in as consultants to do the same thing with nonprofits that are having those struggles and those needs. And that's kind of the journey that I took going from corporate America to the nonprofit world.
Well, I think it's great that people know that because let's face it, you've got this company. I assume it's a for-profit company, consulting company, but the mission really is much like the mission of the Nonprofit Docs channel, is to give people the tools to create a better life, to create a better organization, and to make a better world. And it sounds like this fractional staffing and your consulting, that's really what you're about. And it comes from a place of deep commitment and of personal tragedy and experience. And I think that's important because years ago, just a short story, I was the head of a private foundation, and I used to go to Washington, D.C. for a lot of conferences because of the mission of the organization. And I remember sitting down to lunch with a bunch of other nonprofit professionals, and one of them asked me, well, now, do you really believe in what you're doing, or are you just a hired gun? And I said, what are you talking about? What's a hired gun? And they said, well, there are a lot of people in Washington, D.C. that just go from job to job, whether it's fundraising or executive director or whatever it is, just because they get offered more money or it's a better opportunity. They're not really that committed to the mission, but they know how, the mechanics work. We call them hired guns. I said, I can't imagine going into the nonprofit sector as a hired gun. Now I could see that maybe in the for-profit sector, but not the nonprofit sector. And it sounds to me like that you and the people that you are offering, they're not hired guns. These are people committed to making the world a better place.
I would totally agree. I don't want people to think that the nonprofit world doesn't compensate people appropriately for their skill.
Right.
It does, but you got to work up to that. You develop that skill set over many years. And so I don't want people to think that the nonprofit world doesn't pay their folks appropriately, because that's not true. But people don't necessarily do it for the money. They do it for the fulfillment and the desire to make a difference. That was always my tagline. I want to make a difference in the world. It may only be in my community. It may only be with a certain organization, but to me, I'm making a difference. And that's what helps me to sleep at night and to feel good about myself, is that I'm making a difference. Could I have stayed in the corporate world and made a lot more money and had all kinds of, trinkets and so forth and so on? Yes, I had that opportunity, but that's not really where my passion was. And the consultants that we bring to the table are just like that. As I mentioned earlier, there's a screening process, and I interview every single person, and we talk for quite a bit of amount of time, because I want to understand who that person is, not just read a resume, but I want to understand what they're about. And that's why I'm very comfortable with the consultants that we have on staff, because I know that wherever we send them, whatever client we bring them to, they're going to do a great job, and they're going to be committed to fulfilling that job based on what the client needs are. And that's what nonprofits are all about. It's not about how much money can I make. It's how can I make a difference? And to me, that's what you want to have with someone in the nonprofit world, is someone that's going to make a difference.
Now, my understanding is you're based in Chicago, right? Illinois?
Yes.
Okay, but your work is national?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I would say 98% of our consultants work remote. And that's how we promoted that we're providing remote work, especially as a result of COVID. Remote working has been more acceptable. And in many cases, especially in a nonprofit world, you don't necessarily have to be in the office to do certain roles. But we do have people that when we go through the interview process, we ask them, if we have a client that wants someone on site, are you willing to do that? And if you are, what's your restrictions? How many weeks out of the year, or what restrictions do you have for working on site? Of course, we would also charge the client, travel and expense and all that. It wouldn't be off of the consultant or off of our work. But most of our work is done nationally by doing it remotely.
Well, that's great, because I think that certainly reduces the expenses to the nonprofit of flying people in, flying them out. And quite frankly, I've been consulting and speaking for many years. And when I first started, it was a lot of fun to travel. Ain't so much fun anymore, right? So it's expensive for the client, and it's not fun for the person who's providing the service. So I think that the video connection with all the tools we have are really good, and you can do all kinds of meetings and stuff like that. I do believe that there's a certain amount of time there should be some personal contact, but I think the technology that we have now really makes remote working much better. And like you said, a lot of the roles, you don't have to actually be on location, especially if you're a national organization. Are there misperceptions about fractional staffing? Are there myths that we need to kind of sweep away to let nonprofits know that the barriers to getting part-time staffing or consulting are not huge?
Well, I mean, I mentioned it earlier that one of the myths is that we can't afford it. We analyze the pay scale of every role in a nonprofit every year to see what the average salary is for that particular role. And we do it also regionally because the West Coast may be a little bit higher or the East Coast may be higher than the Midwest.
Right.
So we analyze what the average salaries are and we adjust our billing accordingly. But the main benefit to the clients is that I mentioned it, that they're not paying taxes. They're not paying in Social Security. They're not paying insurance. So hiring a full-time person, they have to take into consideration that they're adding that on to the bottom line. Also, in some cases, they use search firms to find those individuals, and they're paying the search firms to be able to identify those, or they're paying for ads to publicize those positions. So we're saving them that money right up from the get-go. The other thing is that we're only there for the period of time that they need us. If they say that they want us for 2 weeks and the work gets done in a week, then we leave. We're totally flexible as far as whatever the client needs. We're willing to help them out. So I think that's one of the things that is very critical.
Well,
the other thing is that
I would think that would, like, if you say it may take 2 weeks and it only takes a week, these could be return clients, right? You're not looking at a one-shot deal.
Oh, absolutely.
So if they say, "Hey, let's bring Dave's group back to do this," it's because they've had a great experience with you. So you're building a reputation of honesty and competency.
Absolutely. And if there's a problem along the way, I want to know about it immediately so that we could react to it right away. In any business, things like that could occur. So you have to be prepared for that. And so if all of a sudden the client has let's say a client hires us for 3 weeks and we staff them with one of our consultants. And then all of a sudden 3 weeks come up and they say, you know what? We didn't get the job done, not through the fault of your consultant, but we need another 3 weeks. Well, that consultant that we assigned may not have the ability to do another 3 weeks.
Right.
So we're going to bring in another person who has the same level of expertise or more to come in for the remaining 3 weeks so that they don't miss a beat. And because our people are experienced and have been there and done that, they can come in, even though they might not have been involved in the first 3 weeks, they can come in and pick up the slack right away and keep on moving and progressing to the goal that the client is needing. So that's another myth that, the other thing is that, well, we can just rely on our staff to do the job and fill the gap until we hire someone full time. Oftentimes what that results in is it results in either burnout or disillusioned staff, or people saying, I want more money because now I'm doing more jobs. And so a lot of times that could actually create more turnover because now those current employees that are left are disillusioned and then they leave because they're not feeling like they're fulfilled, or you're not paying them to do 2 jobs. You're paying them to do the 1 job, but they're doing the work of 2. So those are all the types of things that we can address with fractional staffing because we don't have any of those barriers. We're coming in with the experience. We're coming in at a reasonable price point, and we're leaving when you need us to leave. We're leaving having met the results and the goals that you set for us.
I think that nonprofits kind of forget that in addition to all the other expenses that you just mentioned, there are benefits, might be 401k or 401b, whatever they're using. And in addition, once you hire somebody as an employee, you're pretty committed to them. And so if it doesn't work out, you're kind of stuck, or you're in a situation that you started with where you have to replace them with someone.
And unfortunately, it's not uncommon in the nonprofit world for there to be a higher level of turnover than in corporate America. I think some of that is just because in corporate America, they could pay people a little bit more, so people are less reluctant to take a to make a jump if they can't make a higher salary. So they kind of stay in there a little bit longer. Where in the nonprofit world, they may be quicker to, well, I'm going to go do something else. Or maybe nonprofit work is not what I want to do in my career. So you got to be willing to respond to those gaps as quickly as possible. And that's what we do. We help you fill those gaps as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and when you're in a competitive market like we are now, I mean, let's face it, I'm a baby boomer. That hump of baby boomers is retiring and the labor market is shrinking. And so people are becoming more and more particular about where they go to work, and not just in the nonprofit sector, but in all sectors. And so you have to come up with more things to appeal to people, whether it's benefits or vacation time or, whatever it is, to get them not only to come on board and be attract the organization, but also to stay. So
Right.
it seems to me that the fractional staffing may be a solution to some of those problems that you offer. So, and I know that you told me, I think there's a video, and if it's okay with you, I'd like to put that into this interview. Would that be okay?
Absolutely.
Okay, well then let's go to that right now, and then we'll come back.
Okay, great.
You need to hear this if you're a nonprofit struggling to succeed. If your nonprofit feels overwhelmed, you need a partner with a plan. At Nonprofit Resource Partners, LLC, we get it. Nonprofits face a whirlwind of challenges every day. From leadership hurdles and fundraising battles to operational snags and administrative headaches, we've seen it all. That's where we come in. Our team of seasoned experts is dedicated to providing the support you need, exactly when you need it. No full-time commitment required. Imagine having access to top-notch professionals in executive leadership, strategic fundraising, operational efficiency, and board development. Sounds like a dream, right? With our fractional contracting services, you get flexible, tailored solutions designed to fit your unique needs. No more stretching your team too thin or blowing up your budget. We're here to help you thrive so you can focus on what truly matters, making an impact. Partner with Nonprofit Resource Partners, LLC. And let's turn your challenges into victories. Your mission is our mission. Ready to take the next step? Let's conquer the nonprofit world together.
Thank you for letting us use that.
Thank you.
I think it explains really even more definitively what you do. But I'm curious because I'm a retired guy from the nonprofit sector. I do some consulting, and I'm wondering what kinds of people you bring into your organization that are either consultants or they are people who will fill interim positions for a certain time period. What kinds of people do this?
Well, I mentioned earlier that we have a significant number of, people out of the nonprofit master's programs. But I don't want people to think that, well, if I don't have a master's, that means that I'm not qualified or I can't do that role. That's not true. Many people that have been in the nonprofit world for years and years and years have just as much experience as the people going through a master's program. But in our role, we looked for people in various categories. We have some people that are full-time. They have other jobs, but they want to make some extra money. Things are expensive nowadays. If they are willing to put in an extra 10 hours and they can make some extra money on the side, and it doesn't impact their current role, they can make some other money, and it's all remote, so they could do it from their home. We have people that are part-time and they want, they're looking for a full-time job, but at this point they don't have that, so they're looking to fill the gap and trying to get maybe 10 or 20 more hours to help with their income. We have people that are totally retired that are, again, they're just, they may be bored sitting around, but they have the knowledge and the expertise and the experience, and they want to get back into it. So, we'll bring people like that in because they have the experience, and in many times it's very extensive experience. So we look for people in every category. And when we hire people, we create a profile on them and we ask all these questions. So if someone says that I can only do 10 hours a week, or I can do 3 weeks in a row, or whatever, or I will travel, I won't travel, we get all those criteria together in everyone's profile so that when we have a client that comes to us and they say, this is what I need, we match them up specifically to the client that fits that need the best, not only based on experience, but also based on availability, so that everyone's happy. The client's happy, they got the right person. The consultants are happy because they're working during the time frame or period of time that they want to work. So that gives us the flexibility to have people in different levels of categories, but in many cases, they all have extensive experience in the nonprofit world. It's just that everyone has different life choices, whether they retire, they want to work part-time. And so why not hire people that have that, the variety, because then they're able to make some extra money and we're bringing skilled consultants to our clients. So it works for all parties involved. So that's kind of how our model is to hire people regardless of their current work schedule. If they are willing to put in the time, then we're willing to match them with a client that has the same requirements as far as what time they need.
Oh, super. And I would think that a lot of your business comes from referral, one nonprofit telling another, because, I think word of mouth is probably even more powerful. So having competent people as consultants is going to be very important for you.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not just referral is key. I mean, I always tell people, you tell 5 people, they tell 5 people, they tell 5 people. That's an old adage that is used. That is very true in the nonprofit world. The other thing that we're trying to do is we're developing partnerships with corporations where we're dealing with a law firm in DC who focuses on nonprofits. And so if they have a client that they're working with that has a need for potentially fractional staffing, they refer those clients to us. And then if we have clients that need legal assistance, we refer them to the law firm. We're doing that with accountants. We're doing that with banking. We're doing that with legal aids. So we're working with other corporations to develop and get the exposure with their clientele who may not have heard from us or may not know where to look, but we're getting the referrals from these other corporations to assist us in developing clients. And then we're in turn referring our clients to them if they have that kind of need, whether it's banking or accounting or legal or whatever. So that's another way for us to expand our clientele.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people who are not familiar with the nonprofit sector, or sometimes people who serve on boards that, this isn't their life, they do this, once a month or whatever, they don't understand the amount of people who work in the nonprofit sector. I mean, 9 to 10% of our workforce is in the nonprofit sector. We're talking millions and millions of people, and it is a very significant sector, and it's a big part of our GDP. And I don't think people also understand the diversity of knowledge you have to have in the nonprofit sector. So just because, I've worked in the nonprofit sector, I've been on boards like you, I've been the executive director, I've worked for nonprofits, I've done grant writing, all that stuff. But there are certain things I'm really knowledgeable at, and there are a lot of things I'm not, because the sector is so big in terms of its needs for special services and knowledge. For instance, nonprofit law or creating a 501c3 or things like that. Those are legal questions. Yeah, I know about them, just like a lot of people in the nonprofit sector do, but you don't know how to do them. Same way with the Form 990, so on and so forth. So it's good that you know about those things, but that doesn't mean you're an expert in those areas. So I would assume that's kind of part of the focus when you bring people in.
Exactly. I mean, to my point earlier, a lot of these things I didn't know either, and because of being around for 30, 40 years doing the various roles, you tend to pick up on that. But also during that period of time, just like in corporations or corporate America, you develop contacts with the expertise in those other areas. So I may not be an expert in, let's say, doing a 990, but I can get you a person that is an expert in a 990, and vice versa. That law firm may not be able to answer a question on how do I do this? How do I do plan giving? That's one that they could potentially answer in some cases. But I mean, let's say they don't know how to do meetings, how to plan meetings. Well, we know someone that can help you with planning meetings. Personally, I've held meetings that I've organized for like 500, 600 people, but I have a couple people on staff that have done meetings for 10,000 people. So that's a whole different level of expertise, handling 500 people versus handling 10,000 people. And people don't realize that. And so that's why having a diverse clientele and having these relationships with these other corporations is vital to getting the services that our clients need. And that's the whole point of networking and telling the 5 people and they tell 5 people and so forth. And quite honestly, even doing a podcast like this, hopefully we're going to be able to help some people and educate some people on different challenges that they may be experiencing. And if they have a need, feel free to reach out to us and we can kind of guide them through that process. So
That's great. Well, Dave, I think we've covered the bases, and I think people are really going to enjoy this. There are a lot of people who probably don't even know this type of service exists, and hopefully we'll be able to help them with their part-time staffing needs, with consulting, whatever, just through sharing this. So we will be sharing your website and your email below, and people will know how to contact you. So I thank you for being a guest on our show today at Nonprofit Docs. And if you have any questions about what Dave and I have discussed, please put a comment in the bottom and we will certainly respond to that. And maybe we'll do another show if we feel that there's enough interest in that question or in that issue. So Dave, thank you very much for being here.
thank you. It was an honor to be able to help the community that I care so much about. I appreciate you asking me, and we're here to answer any other questions that people may have. But thank you very much and really appreciate this time.
You have a great day.
You too. Thank you.